Our top story, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the political race in the United States in the run-up to the presidential elections. Donald Trump leads Joe Biden by 10 points, according to a new poll by the Washington Post and ABC News. According to this new poll, U.S. President Joe Biden is trailing behind his predecessor in a hypothetical November 2024 match. Trump has edged out Biden by 51 to 42 in a head-to-head match. Not only this, but the poll also indicates that Trump is way ahead of his other Republican rivals in the party's presidential election. Now, remember, he has blown all those contenders out of the water. Not to forget that recently, two of the Indian-American Republican candidates, Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy, have gained popularity and momentum in the presidential race, but Donald Trump is far ahead of both of them. But other outlets have called this poll an outlier, but this has given that kind of momentum boost to not just the right-wing media, but also other Republican voices within the entire ecosystem of American politics. But to decode all of this, I'm joined by author and journalist Ray Locker on the broadcast. Thank you, Mr. Locker, for joining us on CNN News 18 and News 18 Global. This bulletin, as we try to decode the entire political dynamics surrounding the U.S. presidential elections, do you think this new poll that has caused such a flurry in the United States, is a fresh indicator of a political shift?
No, I don't think so. I think the poll is flawed. I mean, when you look at the internal numbers, not just the top line, the 52-42 spread, but the internal numbers, Trump leading by 20 points among voters younger than 35 years old, that's just not real. I mean, he lost those voters by at least 30 percentage points the last time around. And there are a number of instances like that that make you wonder about the poll itself. And even the Post called it a poll an outlier among other polls. So the question is, why did they release it? Well, probably because they knew that people would find out that they had a poll that they didn't release, and that would be even more controversial. So polls are a snapshot in time. They're not a predictor. Maybe this was an accurate snapshot, but I think it was probably more of a blurry one than anything that you can really take to the bank in terms of long-term information.
But Mr. Locker, you know how reactive the right-wing media is, and they are running with this poll saying Biden's days are numbered. How do you react to that?
Well, I mean, of course they're going to say that, but they say all sorts of things that aren't true. Look, if I was in the same position, I'd say the same thing. I mean, it's a data point, so you have to trumpet it as best you can. I think the poll was done in good faith. I just don't think it's necessarily accurate when you stack it up against other polls. Is Trump rolling to a re-election victory, making a comeback despite his legal problems? I don't think so. I mean, he's been indicted, but he hasn't gone to court yet. And there's still a lot of things that have to happen. We have other debates coming up among the Republican primary challengers, and maybe somebody will get some traction. Right now, it doesn't look likely, but it's possible.
Let's shift focus to the other part of this poll. Now, Trump is way ahead of other Republican contenders. He's like miles ahead of not just the ones who were part of his administration, but even the ones who are trying to oust him from at the helm of the MAGA base, because they themselves want to lead that entire movement. Why do you think many are still in the fight?
Visibility for a future race, maybe. I mean, maybe they're playing a long game. I really don't know what they're doing. You're running for the nomination against somebody who has never won the majority of the popular vote in the 2 times he's run for president. He's vulnerable. When Mitt Romney announced his retirement a week before last, he said nobody likes Donald Trump. They all think he's a joke, and they do. And yet they're running against him and are afraid to say anything negative about him, with the possible exception of Chris Christie. And so, I mean, I don't know how you do that. They're hoping that somebody else is going to do the work for them, that the legal challenges and all of his legal problems will somehow weaken him so he doesn't, get the nomination. But that just isn't how politics works. You have to take on your opponent, and if you don't, you lose. And so it's really hard to imagine what their strategy is.
Right, and Mr. Locker, something of interest over here back home. Vivek Ramaswamy has seen a surge in support in the elections and in all the polls when it comes to fighting for the Republican nomination. But he's pulled his punches when it comes to Donald Trump. And he's also said that he won't accept the vice presidential post if it's offered to him. Do you think he will accept it eventually if push comes to shove, if Donald Trump takes on Joe Biden and he has to pick a running mate?
Well, look, if Trump is the nominee and he looks like he has a good chance of being elected president again, anybody is going to take the chance to be his vice president. He's 77 years old. He's almost morbidly obese. He can't be in great shape. Anybody who's looking at the long term thinks the guy might die in office if he gets reelected and I'll be president of the United States. I mean, people think that way. And there's no reason to think that Vivek Ramaswamy isn't thinking that way either. I mean, the reason why he's having problems now is he doesn't have, a decades-long record in the public eye. People never heard of him until a few months ago. And so, that's what happens to people like that. So, it's just a lot different. Anybody says they don't want to be on the ticket until they're actually asked to be on the ticket. And then they say, yes, sure, I'd love to.
Absolutely. I'm certain he will jump at the chance. My final question, we saw what happened in states like Arizona and Georgia. Do you see moderate Republicans still picking Biden given the legal firestorm and the madness of the MAGA base around Donald Trump?
Yes, I read an interesting article in the last couple of days. I believe it was in the New Republic magazine that said, our suburban Republicans, Biden Republicans, basically becoming Democrats now. And I think that's true in a lot of cases. You look at Arizona and Georgia, both states changing demographically, becoming far more diverse than they used to be. You look at the greater Atlanta area. I mean, it's unrecognizable from what it was 30, 40 years ago. It's tremendously diverse. You can get all sorts of kinds of food from around the world, see signs in different languages. It's just a lot different. It's not the Georgia that people think of the civil rights era, of even Jimmy Carter. Same is true in Arizona, far more Latino than it used to be, more Asians. It's just a changing place. And so I think that change is going to continue. The only thing that could stop it is a surge for Trump among white Republicans, white voters in general. It's not out of the question, but I don't think it's likely.
So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Thank you, Ray Locker, for joining us on CNN News 18 and sharing your perspective on the political dynamics in the United States.